All right, this is a presentation of the effect of slope direction on growth traits for Cupressus sargentii, the serpentinitic soils. This research paper was completed upon assignment as a requirement for the completion of Bio 263, Introductory Ecology and Evolution at California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo. This course is instructed by Dr. Sean Lima. Okay, Sargent cypress, Cupressus sargentii, is an evergreen conifer endemic to California coastal mountain ranges. Sargent cypress has several characteristics that make it a valuable study, one of which being its pyrophytic reproductive method. This tree produces fire-activated seed-bearing cones, meaning extreme temperatures are required for the opening of the strobili and subsequent dispersal of seeds. Because of this, the majority of members of a single population tend to be of the same relative age, which makes for efficient study. Sargent cypress is also one of the few plants that has developed a serpentine syndrome, which is the adaptation by some plants to high levels of heavy metals, such as nickel, that are rich in serpentinitic soils, as seen here. This would be a serpentine barren. These metals tend to accumulate in the leaves of plants, resulting in, among other things, oxidative stress and altered homeostasis, ionic homeostasis. Therefore, the seeds that germinate and develop in these soils will ultimately result in dwarfed plants. At the time this paper was written, few, if any, studies had been performed in particular on Sargent cypress and the integrated effects of serpentinitic soil and ultraviolet light exposure on growth, development, and morphology. This study, therefore, aims to explore the differences in morphology that occur immediately along either side of the crest of the mountain. This was conducted as an observational study, measuring particular variables on trees randomly by selected by position along a north and south transect. San Luis Obispo is not only home to one of the very few Central Coast populations of Sargent cypress, it is replete with serpentine barrens. So, in the previous slide, that picture of the green rock I showed you, the Cuesta Grade is a mountainous ridge that runs east-west along the northern border of the city. This ridge is divided into two by Highway 101, separating the east and west portions of the grade along here. Along the western leg of the top transect road, there lies the Cuesta Ridge Botanical Special Interest Area, home to a very substantial population of Sargent cypresses growing in serpentinitic soil. This forest is uniformly distributed throughout the north and south slopes. The forest on the south-facing slope is uniform and robust, with the vast majority of tree heights occurring between, based on observation only initially, 16-22 feet long along the road and growing in height, girth, while decreasing in altitude and slope. So getting bigger as you go down. The north side of the slope appeared to be opposite, as the trees lining the road were generally between 13 and 18 feet, with a slight decrease in height going away from the road. At 25, 30 feet away from the road's edge down the north slope. So here's an actual picture, north side. Trees suddenly dropped to about 4 feet tall and are very densely packed. So about 25 feet down this way is just a stark line of just midget trees. The front of this, sorry, that probably wasn't politically correct. The front of this forest is a stark line separating the severely dwarfed from the mildly dwarfed trees existing near the road. Hypotheses and predictions. For a study, the measured variables were tree height in feet, trunk circumference inches, height of first branch in inches, and length of the first internode in inches. Slope direction, tree position were also recorded. For the area from which we are sampling, we expect to find a statistically significant difference in mean tree height, with the north slope transect containing taller trees. Typically, taller trees will have large trunk circumferences, larger than the smaller trees of the same species. Since the trees growing along the north slope are expected to sacrifice lateral growth for vertical growth to reach available sunlight, we do not expect to find a statistically significant difference in means among trunk circumferences. Along the same vein, if the trees on the north slope are growing taller to reach available sunlight, we also expect them to have taller heights of first branches that are as well statistically different than those of the south. Since the first branches of trees of both transects are typically shielded from direct sunlight, we do not expect to find a statistically significant difference among internode lengths between the two slopes. So just a quick summary of the growth traits that we are measuring. If I can get this to comply, tree heights here, length of first internode, which would be from the trunk to that first branch off that first branch, right? Height of the actual first branch from the trunk, and then trunk circumference. We also noted tree position, slope direction, tree density for the north and south. Here are the figures. The densities across the transects appear uniform, with the south slope was 0.232 trees per square foot, and the north 0.222, so pretty darn close. Figure 1, tree height distributions are left skewed. You can see the south left. South is blue, north is red. The mean was 18.8 for the north and 17.2 for the south. The spreads are equal for both slopes at 11. The standard deviation of tree heights for the north slope is lower at 3.33 than 3.43 for the south. The t-test between the means of the two slope directions resulted in a p-value of 0.2146. Ignore the t and the degrees of freedom. You guys can visualize this here. That's not statistically significant, relatively low, but anyways, not enough to confirm a difference in tree heights. Oh dear, we lost our spot. The mean trunk circumferences for figure 2, 16.45 inches for the north and 14.73 for the south. The spreads are 15 for the north, 15.25 for the south. Standard deviations lower for the north than for the south. We have a p-value of 0.2879. So again, in ballpark of this one, it's small, but it's not significant. There's no apparent difference between the trunk circumferences in north and south transects. Figure 3, we analyze differences in height, height of the first branch, that is, from soil level. The mean of the north was 26.75, while the south was 21.75. Pretty different. You can see the difference in this graph here. Much higher values existing for the north than for the south. Data spreads were larger for the north at 11.59 than 6.54 for the south. The p-value is low. It was 0.1598, definitely lower than these guys, suggesting one, not statistically significant, but definitely worthy of further exploration. You know, if we were to take larger samples, maybe better locations for our samples, we may find an actual difference. This p-value might drop. And so for me to internode length, we'll just cut to the chase. P-value is 0.6035. Like literally no relationship whatsoever. That was by far the lowest. We have a couple of scatter plots that we conducted from running correlation and linear regression tests for each variable against all other variables. So that'd be 10 regressions in total, actually 12, but 2 of those are redundant, right? Just reversed. So those are eliminated. We have 10 novel regressions. The analysis of tree height as a function of trunk circumference revealed p-value of 0.007786. Boom. That is significant, very significant. That's very low. That's significantly lower than 0.05. Corresponding t-value 2.884, standard error of 0.126. So when we subset these individually, so we just did the regressions for the north and south, p-value grew a little bit because, you know, our sample sizes decreased. I just did something, but still significant. So we do have relationship tree height of trunk circumference. We also ran a correlation and test and linear regression model for all variables for the subset data. And what we found was that there was a relatively, not statistically significant relationship between tree height and tree position, but very low p-values, right? We have 0.1351 for the north and 1123 for the south, suggesting, you know, that this may be worth further exploration. So we have on the north side, as you go farther west, right? Remember our numbering, we started on the east and moved west in the numbering. So if you move west, the trees get larger, seem to get larger. And for the south, it's inverse, right? You move west and they get shorter. Again, no significant statistics here, but certainly worth further exploration. Our correlations were pretty high too, 0.405 for the north, 0.404, and 0.427 for the south, albeit negative. So this study has pretty high potential for confounding variables because it is an observational study, and we didn't really have too many access to materials or resources that could assist in detecting, measuring, or eliminating these variables. So we have soil composition, water content, ion composition, different wind conditions, different temperatures between the north and south. Just a lot of differences that we couldn't really take into account for this study. So further research would be ideal. Maybe an experimental setting where you can grow these trees and subject them to different conditions in a laboratory environment. So conclusions, there's definitely significant correlation between tree height and trunk circumference. There is a potential relationship in the model of tree height as a function of tree position along an east-west transect with respect to slope direction. Again, this warrants more research. And the p-values of 0.1351 for the north and 0.1123 for the south, again reaffirming the need for further research. And we got works cited, and that's it. Thank you for listening.